Hello, it's the talent hour with AHA Amplify. So as we get everybody included and on par for this Zoom, I'm going to give some housekeeping and some admin. We're really excited that you've joined us for this important discussion about talent. And that's what we're going to address today, but we've got other things happening at Amplify that I want to let you know about. So what's going on here at Amplify? Our next AHA with Amplify is on Tuesday, the third Tuesday in May, and we're doing personal CFO. So we're really excited to have Ryan come join us and talk about wealth and estate planning and things that are important to you as people. So we're kind of deviating a little bit from business in this regard, but obviously everybody's got their own money and everybody's got to manage it. And for many of us, this is the first time in our adult life that interest rates have been at a more normal level. So we are of a generation where money was practically free. And that's kind of a crazy thing. It's impacting some of our marriages, maybe just mine. And it's impacting how we make decisions. And, it's funny because I was once the controller in a banking situation, and we actually had to do business recovery planning if interest rates went to zero or lower. So for those of you that remember the Y2K, in the banking and financial services world, there was a similar thing to Y2K when it came to technology and systems, because our systems couldn't handle 0% interest rates, let alone negative interest rates. And so that is what we've experienced as a generation. And now we're at what one would say is actually relatively normal interest rates, but skyrocketing high compared to what we've seen as we've made decisions as adults. So I think that Ryan coming in May to talk to us from a personal CFO perspective couldn't be more timely. And I'm really expecting to learn a lot, and it may be required that my husband attend. So very excited about May's AHA with Amplify. And then in June, we're going to wrap up our season with HR. So similar in some ways to what we're talking about here today with Lyndsey and Amanda and David, but this is HR from more of the policy, process, and classic HR seat. And we know that for those of us as business leaders, and especially those of us that are finance leaders, somehow we end up being the HR leader, and maybe we're not equipped for that. And so for those business leaders that are still wearing the HR hat, or for those finance leaders that are stuck with the HR hat, I think that Kristen is going to be enlightening, and she's going to share some great information in June with us. So that is what's happening. And then, oh my God, we're already done the AHA Amplify season, and we will be taking a short break during July and August and reconvening with a whole new season in the fall. And I can't believe that with today's snow that I'm talking about summer and the summer break, but that is right around the corner. So what else is happening here at Amplify? It is not an AHA event because there will be no learning at this event. We are having a birthday anniversary party on May 30th. You are all invited. It is a great way to help your career and your talent, because it's going to be amazing people that can help you advance your businesses and your career journey. So come and selfishly be there just to absorb the energy of the other people, and also come because you want to celebrate 5+ years of Amplify. It's crazy that we've been around this long, and I think it deserves a party. So we're very excited to be celebrating on the patio and also inside, if because it's a rain or shine party in May, and who knows what it'll look like out there. But we have patio and we have inside at Last Best, our first client, and we're very happy that all of you are invited, and Nikki will share the invite. So make sure you get a spot. It will absolutely sell out. It's complimentary, but we will run out of seats, I'm sure. And I'm very excited that that's coming, and that Jesse and I have made it this far, and we've got twice as far to go, I guess, right? So please join us on May 30th. No learning, but a great opportunity to celebrate our business affiliates, our alumni, our clients, and our candidates, and you members of AHA. So very happy to appreciate you and to celebrate this big milestone with you. What else is happening? Well, I just want to also share with you that, as many of you know, I am the membership chair of Financial Executive International, FEI. And because today is talent, I think it's a chance for me to selfishly also remind you that one of the best ways that you can help your business and your career is through networking. And so for those of you that are financial executives, that's certainly a local opportunity for you and something that I think you could benefit from. And I know that you're here with us today, spending an hour plus because you care about your team, you care about your business, and you care about your career. And so one way that you can feed and serve all of that is through deliberate and disciplined networking. And one of the greatest organizations to do that with here locally in Calgary is FEI. So I'm really proud to be a member and on the board. And I hope that you consider that as one of the ways that you could serve your ambitions and your business's ambitions. And further to that, we also have a CPA event. So similar to both the things I just mentioned, there's a CPA event coming. Amplify is the sponsor. Please make sure to join that as well. It's also at Last Best, and we're very excited that we will be in a room full of CPAs. So another opportunity to network, to give back to your profession, and to serve both your businesses, your own career, and your team. So please consider joining that. It's a CPA sponsored event, so it does have a cost. We're helping subsidize that cost, so it's not a high cost, don't worry. For members, I think it's like $20 or something, and for non-members, it's a little more, but don't quote me on the price. Check the link out. Nikki's sharing that with you. So lots happening with CPA, with FEI, with AHA, and with birthdays. So without further ado, you didn't come here to hear a laundry list of things to do. You came here to learn about talent, and you came here to learn from the people that know it best, which is certainly the ones that I've invited to join us. So we have the rare opportunity that AHA with Amplify is actually amplifiers. And so these are experts in talent, and they are the right people to help you navigate this discussion. So I want to first have them each introduce themselves because they'll do a far better job than I will. And then we will jump into the topic. So Amanda, why don't you start for us?
Sure. Pardon me. My name is Amanda Fisher. I am a growth consultant with Amplify. I support business leaders and business owners with the people side of their financial challenges. So whether that's through permanent placement of a CFO or controller, a fractional finance leader, or even temporary contractors. I am also a CPA. I spent about 15 years in the finance world, predominantly in internal audit, working with business leaders or department leaders on different business processes that were keeping them up at night, finding new ways through that to create some efficiencies. And then from there, I shifted into HR. So working through organizational effectiveness, strategic facilitation, leadership development, talent management, basically taking those same sort of challenges and bringing it live. And all of that has come full circle, working here at Amplify, supporting business leaders and owners with the people challenges associated with their financial strategies.
Awesome. And just who in the world was such a great recruiter that they realized you'd be perfect for this job with the HR and the CPA and all that perfect background? I'm actually
might be my boss.
I always like the story of how I recruited Amanda isn't one that we can repeat, and but I'm going to share it because it's appropriate for this conversation. I got bad news about someone leaving. I wasn't super excited about that. And that very night, I closed my eyes and I'm like, who can do this job just as good, if not better? And Amanda's face flew through my head, and I had a call with her within a day or two of that. And then we had it signed off within like a week or two of that. So problem became an opportunity, and look where we are now. And it's absolutely fantastic that.
Well, the timing was perfect because I was a loan consultant at that point, and realizing in that moment that I wasn't a very good loan consultant, that I was lonely, and talking with some old mentors and peers about, I think I need to come back to the corporate world. And within a week, I had that email from Jamie. So I think it was clearly meant to be.
She sent the energy, and now you received. It was perfect.
Yeah.
All right, David, let's hear about you.
So my name is David Scabar. I'm part of the growth team at Amplify, and as a recovering business owner myself, I like kind of the challenges that I see and hearing the origin stories. A lot of the small and medium growing businesses, and their people related challenges. So kind of navigating those waters with people from from the seat of, we've got all these fantastic people and fantastic resources, and and trying to help them navigate, okay, is this a permanent type of solution, a temporary type of, or is it even, on the other side of our business, the fractional side of strategic financial leaders, and kind of working through those different ways to solve different problems is really interesting to me. And having done it myself through the business owner lens is quite refreshing to hear that the problems that I previously had, I was not isolated by any stretch. So people often come to us in need, and it's really cool to address the challenges that they have. So,
and let me tell you the recruiting story of David very quickly. So when we found out that David was considering a new journey in his career, it actually came from a client, which is also his former business partner. And knowing how challenging business partnerships can be, because many of our clients do, that's exactly what makes them successful, but it's not easy. Knowing that John was recommending David was a huge perk. And not to mention the fact that as soon as I saw the email, in fact, I think the email probably went to Jesse, not me, if I recall, but as soon as I saw the name, I'm like, no, I will get this. I will take care of this, because we are going to hire him. And Jesse's like, we have no job to hire David for. I'm like, that doesn't matter. I'm gonna get him in the pipeline, and the job will come, and we will have David. And I was so excited because I knew the energy that David brought into a room, and that he had been a business owner, and how empathetic that makes him to our clients. And so had a call, had no job for you, but it wasn't shortly after, or we had a coffee, not a call, but it wasn't shortly after that we found a spot for you. And I'm so excited that the timing worked out and that we managed to get you on board. So that's awesome. All right, Lyndsey, what do you have to say about yourself? Tell everybody who you are.
Who am I? Well, I'm Lyndsey, and I am our candidate manager here at Amplify. I work under recruiting services. I would call myself a passionate matchmaker. It's probably one of the most rewarding things that I get to do is match our clients with the right candidate. And I think that I take my job really seriously, and I really try to listen to the needs of the candidate and the client and then match accordingly. I've always been a connector. I came from CPA Alberta, so I have been in the accounting world for over a decade now, and I just can't love accountants more. My whole career has been with accountants, and I really try to lead with a servant heart. I love helping people. We really work off a referral-based candidate pool, and how do you do referrals is really by connecting with others and serving them. And that's really what I really try to do and bring to my job every day. I truly care about people. I think that's what makes me do my job, is I'm just very passionate about helping others. And I just want to do the best job that I can. So I'm also almost celebrating my 2-year birthday with Amplify. And I cannot believe it's been 2 years already, but this has been one of the most rewarding roles of my career, and I know that I'm just getting started. So thank you for hiring me.
Of course, you're just getting started. Barely even out of the crib here. We're gonna have so much going on for you. The funny thing about Lyndsey's recruiting story is that she applied for a job, and I didn't know Lyndsey well, but I knew her enough to have a respect and appreciation for her. And we have a few mutual friends. So I sent a text message to the mutual friends. I'm like, that Lyndsey, that's your friend, she's applied for this job. This doesn't seem like the right job for her, but if Lyndsey wants to work at Amplify, I'd like to work with Lyndsey. And both the ladies thought you could do the job, but they also thought it was weird that you applied for that job. And so I kind of tricked Lyndsey. Actually, I brought her into an interview for the job that she applied. And then I brought the leader of recruiting to the same interview. And I said to him, I'm like, okay, we are theoretically in an interview for the ops role, but I think I'm going to hijack it as soon as she gives me the green light or even a yellow light, because we're going to hire her as a recruiter. And the leader of recruiter says to me, but we don't have a budget. We don't need another recruiter. I'm like, oh, we do. If she's willing to be a recruiter, we are going to hire her as a recruiter, because she will amplify this business, and we need to jump when we get this chance. And I think the ops part of the interview was maybe 7 minutes, and you gave me the green light.
It was a drive-by.
Bright green. And then we hijacked the whole plan, never talked about ops again. And I'm so glad that you are here in recruiting and not in ops. Not that you, I mean, you could do anything you put your head to. I don't think you would have liked it though.
No, the person that's in there is the right person for the job.
Yes, I'm sure you would have done a good job because you're capable of doing almost anything, but I don't think you would have went to bed smiling. I think you would
Yeah,
have
this is definitely more my wheelhouse for sure.
So it's a great example of right person, but not the right seat applied for. Okay, let's get into what's going on with the talent hour. So the first thing we want to talk about is candidate experience. And so at Amplify, client experience is our North Star, and right like tight to that is candidate experience as well as employee experience. But today we're going to talk about candidate experience. And so it's really critical to us that we differentiate in the market by making sure that the candidates are number one. And obviously they have shared interests, and it's not actually a matter of us choosing clients over candidates or candidates over clients. That doesn't actually happen, because by and large, what's going to make it a winning solution and a winning opportunity for clients and candidates are mutually exclusive. And they're the same thing, right? It's going to be the same answer anyways. But if we did end up with a fork in the road, we actually have made the declaration that we would put candidates' experience first. And obviously, when you get to that point, you're already in a very hard decision-making moment. And the fact that we put candidates first it is counterintuitive to our peers. It is not what the competitors do. So we are really trying not to treat our candidates like inventory, which obviously every single person who's worked with a recruiter has had that moment where they feel like there's some kind of inventory, and that it's really just about what they can do transactionally. And that's not what we're trying to do from our candidate experience perspective. And so, today we want to deliver on our promise of candidate experience and really have some open conversations about what maybe other recruiters don't tell candidates, because let's be honest, there's nothing self-serving about some of the things we're going to talk about. If it's not going to help us that the secrets and what's under the hood, but it's important to us because I think it'll make you a better candidate if you are in the shoes of looking to change your career and get hired. Now, for those of you that are joining us as business leaders or hiring managers, obviously, if you put yourself in the shoes of the candidates, you too are going to do a better job in your mission to hire and build a great team. So I think it's a relevant conversation for everyone. So let's jump into it. You take the top job of CFO, for example. And so Amplify specializes in finance leaders and CFOs. We do recruiting for all CPA levels, and sometimes we even dip into the lower accounting and finance levels. But let's be honest, where are we amazing? Where are we far better than our competitors? It's in finance leader and especially CFO. So we've got candidates, they take the top job, and then the probability of them getting let go skyrockets, right? So whether you're the COO, the CMO, the CEO, the CFO, guess what? You join the C-suite, now the chance of you getting fired, a hell of a lot higher. Sometimes we forget that, right? And sometimes in the CFO seat, sometimes it's because you're the throat to choke. So if the worst thing happens, like any executive, you gotta take one for the team and you gotta get out. At the end of the day, the buck stops with you. So if the worst thing happened, it's because of you. Sometimes it's because you're seen as expensive. And so for the clients that we are serving, especially, oftentimes you are the first finance leader they've hired, and you are expensive. It is a massive expense to put you on the payroll, and they are hesitant and they are not really confident in it. So if you are seen as expensive and then you don't earn your compensation in a real way that's seen by the stakeholders, the CEO, the board, then guess what? They are going to save the cost. They're going to do what you've been telling them to do. They're going to save costs. And that cost is you and your payroll. We see it for other reasons too. And I'd love to hear Amanda tell us about some stories where we've seen it and why this happens.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, you're right. Like that CFO role is is an expensive one. And it's because of the risk that that CFO takes on in safeguarding the assets of the organization. That comes with a higher reward, but a lot of expectation and accountability on that individual. And so you have to be ready for that. Part of that is looking at some of the risks that are out there, being that financial steward on the hill, looking out to see what's on the horizon, what could possibly impact the business, and then planning for it appropriately. We have one client, or had one client, who ultimately ended up firing the CFO for the failure to recognize a cyber risk with some fairly standard practices that should have been employed. And so in this case, there was an order that was placed with the vendor that they've used many times overseas. And a request to change the banking information came in. And it was looked at by the CEO, and he said, "Are you going to look into that?" And the CFO said, "Yeah, I'll take care of it." Now, normally what would happen, internal 101, is you would actually validate that the banking information is accurate and correct. And that step was skipped. The payment was facilitated, it was wired overseas, never to be seen again, and neither was the product. So failure to actually have a proper risk mitigation strategy in place for cyber risks, to follow the process from a compliance perspective, or even communicate it to the rest of the team that this exists. It obviously wasn't just a one-off. There were some other things, but it was certainly the icing on the cake. And from that safeguarding of assets perspective, that CFO was terminated. And we came into that picture then to find the right next CFO that would fill that position. Their first time working with a recruiter as well. And it's been a really great relationship in that case. But for that CFO in that case, it was really down to the throat to choke, or the buck stops at that individual. And in that case, they didn't live up to the expectations, and they cut that cost.
So I think cyber is an interesting one, because there's that saying out there that if you don't know who the black sheep of your family is, that it's you. And I always remind our CFOs about this. If you don't know who's in charge of cyber, it's you. And so I love this example, not because I love it. I think it's it's heartbreaking, and I'm sure that individual isn't excited or proud of what happened. But the reality is, we've seen numerous cases where cyber is that breaking point and ends up being a big issue in terms of CFOs keeping their job. I went to a conference not that long ago in Vegas, and a really sad story of a massive global company came up. And in that case, the individual was of a lower level. She didn't get fired, but she followed the process and procedures perfectly. And they were relatively good process and procedures. In hindsight, there was some red flags and issues that she didn't catch, but it wasn't part of her job to catch those. And she ended up on suicide watch because she felt so terrible about the outcome, that she was obviously core of the incident, even though she actually didn't make any errors. She was a low level where process improvement wouldn't have been on her plate. And certainly the process wasn't all that flawed. Actually, it was a very, very sophisticated cyber. So, we can have cases like the one you said, Amanda, where there's some pretty obvious risk mitigation that was missed. And even if there was a CRO in that business, which I think it was a small business, so there wasn't, but even if it wasn't the CFO's responsibility to be in charge of cyber, there was some pretty obvious payment controls and simple controls missed. But it can go the other extreme too. And at the end of the day, there still is someone that often is on the cutting block. So cyber's one that I'd love for our candidates and those listening to recognize who's in charge of cyber. That better be clear. And are you doing the right things to protect your team, your company, and selfishly, even your own job? And so I think cyber's one that's worth pointing out, but it's obviously not the only story we've heard. Lyndsey, what have you seen in regards to this?
I think that there's just, I think I want to just kind of start it off with, like, if you are looking at taking on that CFO function, that there will be risk associated with that. Like, just in general, you're at the helm of the strategic finance function, and it is your responsibility to have your eyes on everything. I think about, let's say you're a NASA engineer, you're an astrophysicist working on the calculation for a proper launch, and you miscalculate by a hair, but the the consequences of that miscalculation are astronomical. And I think if you look at it in terms of what a finance leader brings, it could be astronomical to the business. And you're taking that risk on. Obviously, it's not for the weak of heart. I think that you have to have a certain amount of risk aversion, but at the same time, I think that it's really important to understand your role that you play in averting risk to your organization. So yeah, that's kind of, the buck stops at you. So you have to be ready for that if you're going to go through that and want to go towards the CFO role.
Awesome. Any other thoughts before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? In terms of climbing within your organization, say if you were a controller or a VP finance or another senior manager in the finance team, and maybe there's a change at the helm and there's an opening at the C-suite for you, cyber might not be even on your radar in your current position. You might be the most sound internal operations accountant, and as you climb that ladder, there's going to be so many more accountabilities as part of your role as at the CFO seat, where you'll of course consider that people management and strategic financial leadership are part of it. But as you said, Jamie, if you look around the room and say, well, who's in charge of cyber? If you have to ask that, it's probably you. And if you don't have a specific, personal/professional interest in it, that's definitely something that you should do a deep dive on educating yourself on, because it's going to be critical in your role.
Yeah, for sure. And I just took a little note, and we'll get to it if we have time at the end, about, the one thing that we see a lot, and I know you guys have seen this many, many times, is what got you there isn't gonna work there, right? And so what makes you a great controller, and what makes you valued as a great controller, often is is going to hold you back as a CFO, and it's the exact reason that you're not a CFO. So I've made a note of that, and hopefully we can get back to that, but I don't want to get off track, which is so easy because there's so much to talk about around here that I might have to be facilitated as I facilitate. So David, I've got a question for you. What does a finance leader or candidate need to consider when they're taking this new role? And so, now they're sitting there, they've heard Lyndsey, they know they're taking on risk. They've heard the story of Amanda said about that they're the throat to choke. So now they're like, oh, I better get paid for this then. And so they're sitting there, they want to negotiate a CFO role. And, what should they be thinking about? And then the other side, we got a lot of business leaders and hiring managers joining us today. What do they need to be prepared for when they're hiring that level of an employee? Tell us some stories or what you've recommended or seen in the past, David.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because as you said with Lyndsey and her recruitment story, she came in looking for an operations role, and she left with a recruiting role because it wasn't going to make her heart sing in that operations role. So I think the idea of, again, inherently, a lot of the big four banks and a lot of the big corporate organizations kind of have, if you're not climbing the ladder, you're kind of stepping out the door. So finding that next role is always attractive from the curb. And then, when you don't consider things like cyber or the greater scope of the CFO title, it can be, it's the next title. So it's the next logical step for you to take as a professional. So you're looking at, that's probably a bigger salary. That's probably, a little bit more accountability in the organization, when you're really not thinking that, wrapping your head around the magnitude of the role, the expectations. It's not a 40 right? It's not for the faint of heart. And so when you start to kind of bolt those things on, if you're under the cloud cover of a bigger corporate structure, and you kind of start to look to see, is the grass greener on the other side, you might have a lot of things going for you in your existing role that you don't realize until you start to contemplate these other considerations. We had that this quarter actually recently, where we are talking with a great candidate for a role in a retail organization, and Calgary, you don't have to look too far the oil and gas sector and the private industry is has really, I think, impacted the salary expectations for roles across any vertical, let alone just the energy sector. So when small and medium growing businesses have requirements for personnel, the people that they're attracting, it's a competitive pool to hire top talent. And if you've got, again, that small medium growing business, they've got requirements. They need skilled people that can wear a lot of hats and tackle a lot of high value activities, but they're going to market with perhaps a smaller wallet to pay for it. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin, where someone's considering leaving. They're coming in with high expectations, thinking, "Oh, this is a C-suite role," and with that comes high variable compensation, lots of vacation time, and a big salary. And then on the business side, the client side will say, they're saying, "Okay, we're bringing in a C-suite in the finance department, and we've actually never had a C-suite person there. Maybe we've had VPs, or we've kind of had a committee or a board or owner, board member or owner operator that has been able to fill those shoes. Now we're taking the leap to a new person altogether, and we've got to really dig deep and get creative with how we're going to compensate this person, because a C-suite individual is a high value person. With that comes a higher price tag. So when you start kind of putting all those things together, you say, okay, now we've got this total compensation, and you put it out there, and there's the possibility for a mismatch of expectations at the C-suite, because the small business is saying, we're paying you all this money, this is going to be a big job, and you better really move the needle. And the person coming from a larger maybe corporation or a different industry might be saying, well, I still need my my holiday time and my personal time and my flex days and my benefits and my my variable compensation for exceeding targets, right? So again, it's kind of two sides of the same coin, but there's a lot to contemplate there.
Absolutely. And so, Lyndsey, you're managing the candidates. You're often talking to the clients. I mean, you said you were a matchmaker. This part's the easy part, right? The clients always want to pay exactly what candidates think they're worth, right? Tell us a bit more. Or do you agree with David that there's sometimes not quite the obvious match?
I think really leaning into your recruiter is going to be really important here. So your recruiter has intimate knowledge of the client and what the expectations are, and having that open, transparent conversation is really important. But you also want to ensure that you understand the needs of the business. So specifically in this example, this smaller business could not have someone away from the business for 6-7 weeks vacation that might be allotted for someone in that executive position. That was not plausible for them, and I think having that understanding of the business needs going in and whether that aligns with you is really important. Because you don't want to waste your time. I mean, these interviews are not just you're interviewing for hours and hours sometimes. So you don't want to get in there and then have a complete misalignment just because you didn't ask the question. So ask those questions, even if they're uncomfortable. So just for an example, I've chat with CFO candidates quite often, and if they're telling me, my comp expectations are 350, 500 total comp, I'm obviously not going to say that they align with a family-owned business. Like that is just night and day. Maybe with a large corporation, they would be getting that kind of salary, but not with a smaller owned business. It's not going to align. That's my job to obviously indicate, like, okay, probably not aligned here. Let's move along. but it's also for the person to be transparent about what their expectations are and talk it through with your recruiter. You might be right, you might also be wrong, and you might be thinking that, you know, you've got a little bit more skin in the game, and you know, we understand the market, we understand our clients, so lean on us as well for that. But what are your non-negotiables? Like, really have a clear picture. Keep in mind your vacation, your family time, your work-life balance. As you're getting acquainted with the new industry that you're well, it could be new. It might be new if you're doing a switch. But as you're getting acquainted with the industry and the inner workings of the company, that's a heavy lift out of the gates. That's not just going to come with you being able to kind of take off and kind of come and go, and that's going to take a really big commitment. So just understanding really what you fit in with, and whether that is something that you can see yourself at the helm of this company and moving them forward to the next level. I think it's really important as a recruiter to listen and not just say, you know, oh, you'd be really great for this, and reason, but listen to the candidate, what they're asking for, what they're saying, and then do that matchmaking based on that.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on client experience or this negotiation in particular?
I do think that we do coaching around the candidate experience in terms of thinking beyond money, right? And so we don't define ourselves, or encouraging our candidates not to define themselves by their paycheck or their total comp package. What's actually in it for them beyond the money? What are the non-financial satisfiers in that role? Because money alone isn't a satisfier. It doesn't bring joy to your life. It's really about those relationships, the learnings that you can have, the way that you're contributing, that Lyndsey talked about from that servant perspective, and helping our candidates to be able to see what is in it for them more broadly if they were to challenge their thinking about the compensation side where there is a mismatch.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point for sure. And sometimes people are really looking at, like you mentioned too, David, it's like that up and out within an organization in terms of titles, but up and out also in regards to salary is a big, a big thing that people have been trained, or they just feel that that's the way that careers and lives have to go. But at the end of the day, that's not everything that matters in terms of the energy you're going to have and the impact you're going to have. And you do need to think broader when you're making these big decisions in your life, for sure. And oftentimes people forget to think broader. And I think you guys do a great job of helping them see it. And, I think that the reality is there is a big mismatch. Like, we see those candidates that you mentioned, Lyndsey, that are looking at, 3, 4, 500,000 all in comp, and who are we to question whether they're worth that, or that's the value that they bring to an organization? That may very well be, but what we do know is that there's very few. There is a bit of a pyramid, right? There's only so many jobs at the top, and very few jobs at the top are paying that. So whether you're worth it or not, great, there's a supply and demand situation, and there just isn't a demand for your supply if that's what you're worth. And so what does that mean? And there's some real hard choices to make. Certainly, you can stick it out and hold off for the salary you think you're worth and have a longer period of job searching and unemployment. And for many, that's great. Like, they want to travel, they want to do personal things, they have a lot going on in life besides work, so they don't want to show up for a job that doesn't pay them 300,000-400,000. Good for them. But for others, they get a lot of satisfaction of giving back to teams and communities every day. And so taking what they can perceive as a salary decrease in order to actually give back, be productive, work with people, meet a strategy, it might be worth it. So maybe it's worth taking a job at less money and then proving your value inside, and eventually going back to what you believe that you're worth, and actually helping the company afford the difference. And what I think is really strange, and obviously AHA with Amplify is for business leaders and CPAs, but we have a very significant number of members that are CPAs that are joining us. What's super weird about the CFO role is that it's really like pretty much the only role where if you're overpaid, it is your job, and I would argue your integrity, to admit it. So if you negotiate a job for 300, 400,000 and you get in there and you recognize that this business cannot afford you, whose job is it to recognize that? It's yours. Just like if the CEO is overpaid or any other person's overpaid, like you have a responsibility, and that's kind of weird. It's weird in your financial strategy role that you'd be the first one to have to admit you're overpaid. And so I think people need to think about that when they're negotiating that price point, that, oh, okay, and what happens if you're wrong and they are right that they can't afford it? Well, if they can't afford it, they can't afford it. And you're the CFO of a company that can't afford a very, very material expense. That doesn't make a total, you actually understand what the CFO job does? Because why would you sign up for that? That doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
right? So it's fun working with candidates and clients and getting them to the point where they both see the value. And I think you guys are doing an awesome job, but it's not easy. Anything else you guys want to mention before we move to the next subject?
I think the reciprocal of that as well, Jamie, is who better situated than the senior financial person, the CFO, to look at the books, take a bet on themselves, and prove their value, and then be able to objectively say, not only myself as the CFO, but the whole C-suite or the whole management team are due an incremental pay increase because of the performance. We can afford it based on this and this and this, and I'm showing you it here objectively. So kind of making that bet on yourself with the knowledge that you have at the CFO seat.
Yeah, and it does feel great, David, and you guys have all been part of this. Like at Amplify, when we try to move people's contracts up and move the scope up within clients, we generally do it after we've delivered, and it's a much more fun conversation to be like, hey, we've delivered, we've earned it, let's sign the dotted line. And you're right, that's exactly what could happen within the CFO role, is like, hey, this C-suite, we've delivered, we've accomplished it, we've earned it, we can afford it, let's sign the dotted line. It's that simple. And I've actually been there as a C-suiter that had the opportunity to move the C-suite salary up materially and tremendously, and we did do it exactly that way. And let me tell you, that's a pretty cool feeling, as opposed to like negotiating and bearing it out at day one and then having to earn your value every minute and every day. That's, to each their own. There's two ways to the same sun, but I think people forget, David, exactly what you're saying, is that it's not just upfront hard negotiation. It can be the other, which is prove it, earn it, afford it, sign it. So I love that. Let's move on before we run out of time here. I want to talk about temps. And so one of the things that Amplify has always done a lot of, it's that temps, and also just creatively helping people with their financial strategy people challenges, right? And so a sweet spot that happened, I think, lots of our first clients were temp contracts. It's always been instrumental to our company. And we actually did have a moment in time where we had some individuals that were excited about permanent placements, and they got really hot and heavy on permanent placements, and they lost sight of how valuable temps are and how important temps are. And we had to change the comp structure and change the KPIs to make sure that never happened again, because it was short-term thinking, it was personal thinking, and it wasn't what is best for our community and the purpose we're trying to serve. And the amount of help and difference you can make by having a temporary solution or a creative solution, it's really meaningful, right? And it's important. And so I'd love for you to tell us, Amanda, about options that businesses consider when they're hiring. So, let's say the worst thing happens, your star performer quits on you and you didn't see it coming. And let's say it's for family reasons, so it's not your fault. There's nothing you didn't screw up. You don't have a culture of hell. They quit because of really personal, non-organizational things. But nonetheless, you love them, you appreciate they need to do this for themselves. And now you're sitting there with a hole. Now, the obvious thing to do is put out the fire, go fill the hole. So if X quit, you go out and you hire X in the same job description, the same for same, right? That's the quickest, the easiest. It's the way you put out a fire. But, you know, that isn't always the right answer. And so how can market conditions drive different creative ideas, permanent, temp, some of the other choices? Tell us some stories, Amanda. What should be considered at that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the natural choice is to replace like for like. So you've got a permanent employee in there, they leave for personal reasons, nothing to do with the organization, but it certainly leaves a hole in the organization. And the first response be to go out and refill with a permanent person. While that is maybe the right choice, it is often a longer solution too, because you want to vet them, you might want to court them a little bit longer, especially as you climb up that the ladder there to more of a CFO. You're going to date them for a little bit because this is your business partner ultimately, and you want to make sure that who you're getting into bed with, so to speak, is the right choice. Meanwhile, the work continues. And so there are some creative solutions to fill that need while you figure out what the next right move might be. And so there's temporary contractors that you can bring in that meet that need. You can reach out to our team at Amplify to find a temporary contractor that's been vetted by us. We're 95% referral based. We've likely worked with this individual in the past. We know how they perform. We can get them in that job and fill that need immediately and just kind of take the heat down a little bit so that you can think through what the next right step is strategically for the team. Maybe there's just a project that's on the go and it's like, you know what, if we could just bring in an extra set of hands to help get this over the finish line, we would just feel a lot better. And so we can also bring in a temporary contractor that supports in a timeline where there's a clear finish at the end. There's also an element of, you know, this person leaves, they were incredible. How are we ever going to replace them? Nobody is like that individual. And so what seems to be really trendy right now is a temp to perm situation. So it's like a test drive for both the client and for the candidate or the contractor to go in and see, is this the next right place for me? Is that the next right individual for our team? And so we have clients that will bring in a contractor to test drive for, you know, anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks. And within that time, they're deciding, are they the right person? Are they filling the job? Are they supporting the team? Are they a culture match? And at the end, they're making a decision on whether to convert them to a permanent placement or not. And so we had one client who at Christmas-ish lost their senior finance person for personal reasons. And they were approaching year end and some audit work that was going to be done. And there was nobody else on the team that could fill this role. They were very small, and not for profit. So cash was also tight. And we happened to have someone. So this is where Lyndsey talks about having that serious matchmaking. It's like, this person's incredible. I wish that we could find them something. And then that something shows up and you're like, oh my gosh, like how did we create this? And so we placed that individual in there as that senior finance person and it just took the heat right down. She knocked it out of the park. And within the 3 months, the goal was we'll bring this contractor in, we'll test drive her, but we'll figure out if there's another solution out there for us. And that story quickly shifted to, we really love her. Like she's so good for business. She understands what we're trying to do. She's got the right mindset. We ultimately just want her. And so she ended up converting to permanent there. We have had examples too, where it's, yeah, I'll come in and do the job and it's a test drive. And you realize that it's not the right fit for you as a contractor or for the organization. The work is good. The work product is great. And it's just not the right fit, but that's okay. So we always just encourage the clients to be grateful for that and the contractors as well to learn what they can. It's a great chance to see what you do like and what you don't like in that temp to perm conversion piece. The other piece that you're seeing grow legs, Amplify is a huge, I mean, it's our flagship, is that fractional finance leader position. You're seeing the fractional model expand beyond finance into HR, into marketing, into legal. And so where there's organizations that realize that they're ready for a full-time, for that strategic financial leadership, but maybe can't afford a full-time person, or from a cash flow perspective, it's like, well, we're too new. We don't actually need a full-time person. Maybe we can bring somebody in fractionally instead. And so having those conversations to help them meet the goals or the strategies that they're looking for on a fractional basis. So you get access to that strategic financial mindset without the full-time FTE cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. David, if you could expand a bit on what Amanda was saying, and then maybe also talk a bit about it from the contractor's perspective, because one thing I find frustrating is that I hear it every once in a while, people will assume, well, I'm not going to get good candidates if I go temp to perm. And I mean, as a business owner, you may have experienced this. In fact, as I'm talking, I realize I'm a hypocrite because I literally think I was having a conversation about this the other day of like, oh, I know it's only a 12 to 18 month contract, but if I post it that way, I'm not going to get the people I want. So let's post it as a permanent. I literally did this. I'm my own hypocrite. There's moments I'm a consultant and there's moments I know better. And then there's a moments I'm a business owner. I wear all the hats. And so lots of business owners will be like, well, I don't want a temp or a contractor. And I just want to go straight to perm because that's how I'm going to get the best candidates. But we forget that it's a two-way trial too. There's a lot of people that don't want to sign the dotted line and make a permanent commitment because their own personal integrity, right or wrong, is that, you know, that a job that they take, they have to be at for whatever their personal idea is. Some I've heard 6 months, a year. Some people are like, I won't leave a job before 3 years. I mean, everyone has their own. That's not a best practice by any means. We don't encourage any of those standards, but there's a lot of people that have personal integrity and they have literally a number associated with it. So tell us what you think about temps and the contractor's perspective and other stories and ideas.
Well, I think a bit of a subjective element there is the inherent bias that you'd come at the market with. If you had somebody that you loved in that seat and you knew their nuances, you knew their skill sets, you knew what they brought to the entire, like they brought their whole selves to their role, and you guys were working well together, and then, you know, then they leave unexpectedly. And so now you're trying to fill their shoes, and you've got this bias of you're looking for a person that looks and sounds and smells exactly like that last person. And a temp might actually be your way out of getting the work done that's right here. But while you're able to, you know, have the slower play to look for the more longer term solution. And I think that a temp in that regard has a lot of value. Now, as far as you were saying about, you know, why would we go temp? Maybe it's not the best talent. Maybe that people have some warts on them that we can't quite get over. I would flip that on its head to your point and say, you know, from the accountant's perspective, well, why is that role vacant? Why are you looking to hire so urgently? What's going on with your culture? Why, you know, why did they leave unexpectedly? The whole explain this gap on your resume. Well, explain this gap on your roster, right? So it's this kind of mutual situation where you get to try out and be a little bit more selective if you're the financial professional looking for the next opportunity, where, you know, maybe you had a liquidity event or you're taking some time or you had a couple wins in your track record that allowed you to be a little bit more selective. And now this is a great way to kind of play the field as a contractor and find your next big opportunity. And the amount of times, you know, that you have that, not a safety net, but a little bit of reassurance knowing that you're not doing pro bono work while you're trying to find your next big gig, but it is a good opportunity to have that kind of try before you buy. And then to kind of pivot off that, you know, you're saying from a business owner standpoint, the longer that role is vacant, you know, the more that you're getting pulled into the back of house as an owner operator or the visionary leader, when, you know, you're spending time in a function that you're not expert in. And it's not only doing that, but it's the time value of or it's your value of time, where you're getting pulled into the back of house, you're not doing the things that have made you successful to this point. So perhaps dropping those preconceived notions about a temporary person, getting the work done, and, you know, at the end of a temporary contract, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's project based, you know, the project's done, you can both walk your separate ways. You're grateful that the work's been done, and, you know, it's giving you some breathing room at year end or at the end of a project or a system selection or whatever it may be that you're not expert at. You've entrusted somebody that's capable and vetted by, you know, quality candidate managers and people that have had experience working with these people. So you know that the work can get done. Now it's just over to, is that culture a good fit? And what better way to identify that than having that working relationship?
Awesome. So Lyndsey, just quickly, I want to touch on one thing. You know, when we sometimes have arguments with clients, if that, not in a negative, that sounds confrontational, but good discussions with clients about the level they need with temps. And I am a big advocate that if it truly is a temp, so not a temp to perm, but a true temp, like the project that you mentioned, David, with the system selection, or helping with year end, or what have you, or you're filling a role, but you also are doing an org structure redesign, so you're not expecting it to be that role, but in the meantime, you need someone in the seat of the role that just got vacant. So a true temp, not temp to perm, we push really, really hard that we put overqualified temps into there. Talk about that, Lyndsey. Why does that work? The few times that we caved and put the right level in a temp, I think those are the few times we've had some major issues. Talk a bit about that.
Yeah, at Amplify, we typically place 1 to 2 levels above what is the necessary requirement. And we do that because, first of all, there are people that are just professional contractors and they are well-oiled machines. They're chameleons, so they can go in, get the work done. But having that, being able to recognize that the next level up, they're going to just go in and be able to hit the ground running. There's not going to be a huge lag time. They've probably seen it already. They've got familiarity with being able to think on their feet and just kind of dive in and get the work done. I think if you've got that experience and you've got that, just that even one level up, you can look at the work in just a clearer picture. You've been there, you've done that, you've probably seen the scenario a few times or two, and you can just really get to work. So we always really try to put in 1 to 2 levels above what the client's asking for. And we will push sometimes and say, if you need this done in a certain amount of time, because there's also deadlines around this, someone who has the more experience is going to get it done way quicker than someone who you might be thinking, okay, I'm just at this level, let's match skill for skill. Someone who has a lot more experience is going to be quicker. They're going to be more adaptable. They're going to be able to think on their feet. They're probably going to be really great problem solvers. They might bring a new avenue of thinking to the role to help you kind of solve those problems that come up. So that's really why we focus on trying to get someone in there that is 1 to 2 levels above.
Absolutely. And I think that what people need to remember is that obviously, there's the risks if you hire someone that's overqualified for a permanent role. And some of those risks are real, and that's a separate conversation, which if we have time, we could actually address, because it's an interesting conversation. But those risks are often they're going to get bored, they're going to push for more, they're going to be ambitious, they're going to want to get promoted when I know realistically I don't have a spot for them. All those things, right? Which there's some validity to. There's also some stereotypes and misconceptions. But in a temp role, those don't apply. They're not going to get bored. They're going to feel valuable and feel like they're giving an impact because they're overqualified. And so that whole thing, it's the other side of the coin. It's not true at all, because it's designed to be short term. So even if they're bored in the sense that it's easy, they know it's only a 3 or 6 month runway, so that's not going to be a thing. And they know what they're getting into. They accept that up front, and that boredom is quickly offset by the fact that they are hitting the ground running, that they're providing impact, that they're providing value, that they're meeting and exceeding expectations. And that's the way the whole thing is set up. And so that idea that you can't have someone overqualified because of boredom and risk isn't applicable to a temp. And it's important to remember that. And obviously, if that temp contract is 6 months or lower, it's a full, easy answer. That runway is so short, no one's going to get bored or frustrated. They're going to use that time to provide impact and learn and build relationships. Now, when you're starting to talk past 6 months, maybe there's a bit more thought to be put into that risk of boredom or what have you. But when it's 6 months or lower, take it off the list of considerations. That's not a thing. And I think people forget that because they're so used to hiring for permanent and having that top of mind. So we're going to move into the value of the recruiter. But before we do that, we did have a member talk about ageism. That's not the word that they use, but that is what they're talking about. And this is actually a conversation that does get to me sometimes, because Let me be clear, there is ageism, and absolutely clients are not willing to hire people of a certain age, be it both younger and older. And it's because of the number, because of the age. And, it is theoretically illegal. So they might not spell it out to either us they don't spell it out to us as a recruiter, and they certainly don't spell it out to the candidate, but it's clearly there. And just like any other ism that's illegal, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean it's not impacting hiring decisions. And it is frustrating for sure. And I think it kind of ties back to what we were just talking about with the overqualified candidate. There's a lot of misconceptions, and what a lot of clients need to recognize, and what we try and coach them, is that, sure, this person's overqualified or at a different level, but exactly what you just said, Lyndsey, when it comes to temps, the same thing you said could apply to why you would want to hire someone that maybe is at the 3 or 4 year runway left, or is a bit older, right? And how they can hit the ground running, they can feel valuable because they're making an impact, that they're there, that their main objective in their career now might be the opportunity to mentor and to share their knowledge. They're no longer worried about the actual tasks and transactional and accounting that they're doing. So that part's secondary to them anyway. So let them be overqualified. Let them bring that value. And it's a great way to have a succession planning, is to bring someone in, even if it's short term. So that's one of the coaching opportunities we've had to address aging or ageism. I think it's real. Is there anyone else that has some comments on the ageism and how that impacts hiring decisions, and what we've seen, and ways that candidates could overcome that if they're of a certain age and that's stopping them from getting the opportunities?
I don't think it gets called out explicitly though, right? Like nobody's going to say, at least we have an experience, well, that individual's too old, they're going to retire, their health risk, whatever. But I think there is an element of recognizing the wisdom that comes with somebody who maybe has age on their side, or maybe doesn't, depending on how you look at it, and what you can learn from that individual. I think with the age of convenience and just how fast things are moving, people aren't staying in roles for 10 or 15 years anymore. You're only looking at maybe 2 to 4 years. Like if you can hit that 2 to 4 years, you kind of met expectations in terms of retention. And so if this individual, has, let's say, a runway of 7 to 10 years left, actually, they're probably still a great hire for a number of reasons beyond just the number that shows up on their birth certificate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I was to coach a candidate that feels like they're facing ageism, the one more real issue is whether or not they're up to par when it comes to technology. And I think, that's something that I would address head on if I was feeling like I wasn't getting real chances at great jobs. Is, where are you at with technology? Is that a weakness, and how are you going to mitigate it? And if you're not weak in technology, make sure that you cut that off right at its knees, that's not an issue that you have, even though it is one that is perceived to be an issue of your generation. And I think either way, you should call it out and address it. And then there's probably other risks as well that, just call it out and tell the employer how it is you're going to mitigate that risk if it's real, or how it's not a real risk. And it doesn't apply to you, even if it's, commonly seen in your generation. So I think hitting it straight on is another thing that candidates could definitely do. So before we move to the next topic, any last comments on temps? All right, we're running right on time here. So value of a recruiter. It's time to talk about why we should hire a recruiter. So, it's funny because there's those memes that talk about like small businesses and how you should support them instead of asking for something free. And yet when one of your service lines is being a recruiter, there's no doubt that you get asked, it's common to get an email with like 30 CPAs. Hey, does anyone know a senior accountant in X industry? I'm hiring, right? And that's like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And in fact, all of you hiring managers and business managers, my team's gonna get mad that I said this, but let's be honest, that's a good idea. It's a good idea to reach out to your network. It's a good idea to to see if someone has someone. You can find a unicorn so often that way. So in no way would I discourage you from having that moment and doing that when you are in a hiring situation. But at the same time, when you're the recruiter that gets stuck on that email and you're like, I could swear, but that's not appropriate on Zoom, but it's like, what, like, yes, I have candidates, but you have to pay me to get them. I don't just hand them out for free, right? And so it's interesting when you're in the world of recruiting and you're providing real value and you know you're helping people, but yet people think they can just do it or get it for free. It's fun. It's a fun job. And we obviously, when we recruit recruiters, we have to make sure they recognize that this is a dilemma. David, I'm going to pick on you because you've been a business owner, and I can say for myself too, like, I don't hire recruiters. That's not the first thing I do. I always think I should be able to do it myself. There's also a bit of pride to it. It's like, why can't I do this? Like, isn't hiring just a basic business leadership skill? Like, why can't I just do this myself? And so I think it's normal for a hiring manager and a business leader, their default answer to be that I should just do this myself. And some people are great at hiring, in fact, but at the same time, is that the highest and best use of their time, right? And so David, you've had these moments, I'm sure. Now, if you went back to yourself as a business owner, what would you tell yourself in terms of the value of a recruiter and why using a recruiter can be the right decision for so many hiring managers and business owners?
Well, I think it's at its core, it's the perception of value, right? You're saying, it's costly. It's like, yeah, it is costly. You're now hot lapping LinkedIn jobs and Indeed and all this stuff. You've got to try to make assumptions based on the job market of who you're trying to tackle or the role that you're trying to fill. And, like any professional services, of course, there's going to be a fee associated to it because they are the experts, right? They're specifically in an Amplify use case, we're, manager level and higher for the accounting function. So our niche is, a defined scope where we're not just aggregate collecting pieces to maybe deploy somewhere sometime in the future. We have an in-depth knowledge of not only the client market, but the candidate market. And we are aware of the pace at which these people get snapped up into roles, the life cycle of people in that role, the competitive, salary ranges. All of those things are all wrapped up into the knowledge that exists within our organization. So, looking at it from the business owner side, from the moment you start to think, do I need somebody? The answer is probably there. It's like that adage, when you flip a coin, the answer that you want when the coin's in the air before you even see the way it lands. And so now you're going to say, okay, now let's start writing up a job description. And do I know exactly what I need? If you're in an owner operator's seat and you're looking to hire a senior finance person, what are the roles and responsibilities of that person? You're going to come at it from a bunch of different angles, saying, oh, I need tax advisory and I need year ends and I need financial statements and I need my APAR to be tight. Oh, what about strategic stuff? What about this? It could be just such a black hole to a business owner that, even just bouncing those types of things off of, seasoned recruiting people like Amplify, and certainly like Lyndsey, seeing the people that she sees in market, knowing the background and how they can apply their skills in a given organization. There's so much value to be gleaned there. And from the moment that you can, start that engagement and start filtering through people to be interviewed, there's already been a first round of interviews that's taken place, not to mention the background that we have with these people and the referrals that we are so, fortunate to have based on these people. There's been 3-4 gates that they've gone through to get to the point where they've had that initial conversation, all without, having to look at a resume or create a job description through the owner operator's lens. So I think all those things, you're talking about weeks, if not months worth of work that can happen in a short time because it's such a specialized function. So if you're looking at, but can I bear that cost? It's like, well, I'd put to you that you can't afford to not pay it because of the time horizons you're talking about. And then if there's any criticality there from a time horizon standpoint, that's all going to land somewhere, right? It's on your seat, or it's going to be done haphazardly with someone in your organization that's, begrudgingly performing the activities that they're out of their realm on. So I think there's just so much more that goes into, cultural matchmaker, like Lyndsey said, the network specialist, all of those things that go into that recruiting function is rich with value, I'll say.
Yeah, for sure. Murray Bandura, who is many people would remember as a recruiter, always used to say the line, you're asking me for a discount, you're asking me, you're telling me I'm too expensive. Like, what part of my job do you not want me to do? And the reality is there's a lot of work when it comes to hiring. Hiring is a lot of work, and that's time and effort that's being spent on hiring, which is generally not a business owner's or hiring manager's day job, and it's usually not their skill set. And so for every dollar you save and every minute you spend, could be spent on growing your business, supporting your team, and achieving your strategy. So it's always a give and take, right? So Lyndsey, what are your thoughts on this? Or sorry, Lyndsey, what are your thoughts on this?
So something else to actually think about, and I have seen this happen several times with some of our clients, is they'll come in and they'll be like, hey, I'm hiring a controller. That's what I need. And we start talking to them and we get into the weeds and we're like, this is sounding more like a senior accountant, or, you have this person, we can collectively look at the team and look at their skills and see, well, maybe you could elevate this person and then, have this fill in here. We're advisors as well, right? Like we're recruiters, but we're also advising you on how to best utilize your talent too. And sometimes you might not know what you need. So then we go through that as well. You're doing a download, you're telling us about your team, how it works, how it functions, and then we can give advice based on that. And I've seen Amanda turn, like, so many times, her being like, that's what you need. And the client is so grateful, because sometimes it's not so written, like they think they need something, or because they did a Google search and they're like, hey, this is what they're told me I need. You might not need that, right? And then you're wasting time and money that could just be like, no, actually, you just need a really great senior accountant, and then have that development piece in there to elevate them once they've got their boots on. So we've been able to do that quite a few times for our clients, and I think that is a huge value add. But you don't look, a lot of business owners don't look at accounting and finance resumes every day. I do. I look at them every day, all day. I know what I need to look for. I know what skill sets they need for each level. And then I'm also chatting with them, and I'm digging under the hood, and I'm really having open, honest conversations to really figure out what that candidate can bring to the team. And then I present their profiles. You get little summaries from us. So not only, you might not even have to, not saying you shouldn't read resumes, but we actually summarize our candidates for you, and we give highlights and say, this is why we think they're great for the job. This is how we know them. This is what they bring to the table. And we kind of summarize it in this cute little thing for you to just be like, oh, awesome. And would you like to interview them? So you go from possibly going through 50, 60 Indeed resumes, some of them not even relevant, some like maybe an engineer applied to an accounting role. Like, seriously, I've seen it. Like, it's not to say that that person's wrong. It's just, you have to weed through all this, and it takes a lot of time. Whereas with a recruiter who you've already downloaded your culture, you've already downloaded your needs, you know what you need, they can go and say, hey, here's 3 to 5 candidates. This is why I think they're great. Let me know, and I'll set up interviews. And we even handle the interview process, like all that scheduling. Like, that is invaluable time to you because you have a lot on your plate as a business owner, and you don't need to spend time looking at 50, 60 resumes to get the right candidate.
Awesome. And so, Lyndsey, I want to talk a bit about the other side of it too, is that, you know, if you're hiring, so the types of clients we work with, which is most similar with the members that are here with us today and spending their lunch hour with us. These are people, be it hiring managers or business owners. One of the most important things to them in their career and their job, and even bigger picture, is their people. They love their people. And so, you know, with that as a driver, why is it important to have timely and successful hiring? How does that impact your people and the current workload and the team and the culture and retention?
Oh, this is like, I'm going to get on my soapbox. No, I'm just kidding. First of all, timing does matter. And I've had, you know, so many clients come in that they should have hired yesterday, and beyond yesterday, I mean like a year ago. I think it's really important to have a pulse check on your team. Is there an unreasonable amount of OT going on? Are they drowning? And this is not just on month end and quarter end. I'm talking like, are you seeing your staff drowning because they need a life raft? And that's usually more hands on deck. That's just if you're a growing business, like, which are typically the people that we work with, the companies we work with are growth businesses, you're going to have to invest in new talent, and timing is everything, because you don't want to have a team that are resentful for the fact that you didn't get someone in there in time. And fit is just as important as the right time. If you're cognizant and you're looking at your team and you've got your eye, on the whole picture, then you should have a good idea as when that clear point, and it should be before you need them. So you should be looking ahead down the road of where you want to go as a team, looking at different projects that are coming on board, and then saying, okay, how are we going to get this done? Having conversations with your current team. Do you have capacity? Jamie is amazing at, I'm going to just give her, pump her tires for a second, because she's continually asking, like, okay, this is great that we want to do this. Do we have capacity? We do a just-in-time hire, but we do it very strategically, and we're never floundering. We always are bringing people. We're looking at the trends. Okay, does this look like something that we're going to need support in? Okay, let's get them on board. So then when they're trained, by the time your need is there, they're trained, they're a well-oiled machine, and everything keeps moving smoothly. I think that is, you can't really afford to not hire in time. And I know, don't get me wrong, budgets are a big thing. Budget season, you have to work it into the budget. And if you have a hire that you didn't expect, it's not always easy to get that money, right? And I get that. And then on top of it, if you're using a recruiter, there's more to that budget. But the cost of not doing it could be detrimental, and you could lose really amazing, valuable employees that just wanted the help to begin with. They didn't want to have to quit to make a point of that this is too much. So I think it's super important that you're listening to your employees and you're watching their workloads and their capacity.
Yeah, and I think, one of the classic examples I've seen more than once, and it's just like the easy example, is like even mat leaves, right? Like the number of friends I've had that have been so frustrated that they didn't get to cross train the person that took their role. And it's like, I gave them 6 months notice, and now they're scrambling, and I feel like I left them in a bad spot, but it was because I didn't have someone to train. And then meanwhile, the whole team around is feeling the same way. And so that's like an easy example, because it's like you generally had a reasonable amount of notice. So what is your excuse? Let alone when we're talking about more strategic decisions, Lyndsey, that maybe that hiring manager is just as much in the weeds and the stress that they literally didn't see it. They didn't see the forest for the trees, right? But we see so many cases where they absolutely did know, and they're still pushing the can down the road, and thinking that this is a chance to procrastinate. And it is not. Like, hiring is strategic, and it can feel like it's busy work. It can feel like it's another thing on the side of your desk, But at the end of the day, businesses are made up of people. So if you don't consider hiring strategic, you don't consider hiring something that's worth investing time on and bringing an expert in, good luck with that business, good luck. Because that's just ridiculous. It really is. Obviously, I'm idealistic, so I'm being extreme, but it is a strategic part of your role. And if hiring is part of your role, don't take it lightly. It's pretty important. What else is so important? Anything else on the value of recruiter before we move to questions and answers?
I will say that the value, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a recruiter, because obviously I have to raw recruiters, but I had a hiring manager reach out to me, and she wanted to use us, and she already has that know and trust factor, and just knew that we would do a really good job, and got a lot of pushback from the employer, and they went a different route and hired internally and did a friend more so, rather than the actual skill set that was needed. And it didn't work out. And, back to the drawing board, you're now 3 months further down the line. You now probably have some staff that are a little bit resentful of the fact that they just took 3 months trying to get this person up to speed, who wasn't really a fit to begin with. Think about if that just didn't have to happen, if you would have just kind of gone with the expert at the beginning, where would you be in your business? Because now you're already, this is an important function. So not only has this function not been fulfilled properly for however long it took to kind of see if this was a good fit, now you've got you're all backed up with different things that the person that's coming in that does eventually get the job is going to have to catch up with, which, just from an employee experience, even for the person that wasn't the fit, it's not a great client, it's not a great employee experience to be hired for a role that you're not actually equipped for, and then you fail, and then they're like, oh, you failed, so that sucks, see you later. Like, no one wins here if you're putting in the wrong person. It's not fair to the team, it's not fair to the employee, and at the end of the day, you're way further behind than if you would have just had the right person in the right seat. That is how detrimental it is to the success and kind of moving forward as a business, because accounting function is very, very important for any business.
Absolutely. So we have
if you just think of,
oh, go ahead, David.
Sorry, I was just thinking about further to Lyndsey's point, the cost of a false start is like, the time cost is just, so if you think of the hiring manager coming in, settling on somebody, trying it out, doesn't work for whatever reason, they leave, they're going to have to take their foot off the gas and just reevaluate as well. Naturally, your head is already in, now we've solved it. And then for whatever reason, perhaps the onboarding was unsuccessful, or they weren't fit for the role, over their skis, whatever the case may be. Now it didn't work out. It's like, look, maybe I'm just going to stop dating for a while and just chill. And then maybe, 6 months go by and you haven't had anyone in that seat. And what does that do to the rest of the team and the culture around it, right?
Absolutely. There is a lot of analogies you could use with dating when it comes to hiring and such, but we won't go there. So if anyone has questions, please do let us know in the chat, and we'll make sure to address them. I've got a couple from some of the things that you guys mentioned. And so one of the things I mentioned that if we had time, we would talk about is what got you here isn't necessarily what's going to make you successful. And we've been hiring a lot in Amplify Tech, actually. And one of the things I've been talking to these functional consultants, that they're tech roles, not accounting roles, I've been explaining to them that, hey, part of your job when you're on an ERP implementation is to really think about the strategy of the business and how this small technology automation is going to help that business advance. And you need to be constantly thinking about that organization strategy and vision and purpose when you're having conversations and you're driving decisions and you're doing the important components of an ERP implementation. But what's interesting that I've been telling the functional consultants is that the problem is that the person that you're working with that's actually on the project may not have that perspective. And we know this to be true, that many controllers have very important in-depth work. And, you know, they're on the ERP and they're probably a project leader and a sponsor and in the gritty grind of getting that ERP implementation done. Meanwhile, they've got their month end, their quarter end, their compliance, they're running a team. Like the controller job is honestly one of the most thankless, hardest jobs in the entire organization, whether you're a small organization or you're like Suncor. It is honestly one of the hardest, most thankless jobs. And so guess what? As a result, you don't necessarily see the big picture when you're sitting in the controller job, because frankly, that's not what you're paid to do. You're paid to get the weeds done. You're paid to get the dirty work done. And so when you're making decisions on the ERP implementation, actually, you're not necessarily thinking big picture. You're not necessarily thinking strategy. You might be thinking about your month end or your team or the silo that you live in. And so it's hard for our functional consultants to bring those team members up. And the reason I'm giving that as a story, as an example, is that, you know, it is exactly that. A great controller gets the details, they get it right, they do a great job, and then they get promoted to CFO, and all of a sudden they can't do it, because it's what got them there, what made them successful as a controller is often what's going to kill them and get them fired as a CFO, because they're not big picture, they're not visionary, they're not showing up as a business leader first, they're not an executive. And so they almost have to drop everything that got them promoted, got them successful, that they were constantly valued and loved and appreciated for. Now all of a sudden that not only isn't important, but it's actually holding them back. So Amanda, tell us a bit about how you coach someone through that transition. It's kind of a shitty moment in time that you got what you finally wanted, and everything that made you good is now a weakness.
It's holding them back for sure. I mean, it definitely gets them there. And then it's just that new mindset or a new way of thinking in terms of that strategy. And so having a coach or somebody that's been in that seat is really important. Even working with various clients that maybe have a controller in place and they are looking to bring on a CFO. Well, we're just going to promote our controller. They can be our CFO. It's like, well, hold on a second. There is some coaching that is needed there to help shift the mindset that takes it out of the weeds, out of the day-to-day where they've been super successful and they're very talented there. We can make another analogy or another link there as well in a second, to be able to have those broader conversations. You're thinking more broadly about risk, for example, about opportunity, what risks are worth it. But having somebody who's been in that seat and knows what it takes to think that way is really, really helpful. Even on the fractional side too, like as we're placing controllers, for example, if somebody's asking for a controller, well, is there a CFO in there as well that can provide some coaching and oversight? If there's not, then there's a different conversation that's being had. But what gets you here doesn't get you there is really the name of the game when it comes to making that step change from controller up to CFO. It's like, what is that way of thinking, that longer view, longer term look at the direction of the organization and how you can best partner with the executive to get them there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you raise a good point about the mentorship. If you don't know what great looks like, if you don't know what a CFO looks like, good luck showing up as one, right? And if that is available within the organization, it's even more practical and applicable. And so one of the things we do is we're constantly pressuring our people that, you know, what's an ideal client look like? An ideal client does have a successor. Hopefully we place them as a recruiter. And our fractional CFO should be bringing that person up. And we've had some really good successes where we did have a story that looked very much like the ideal roadmap. Don't get me wrong. Most situations are never ideal. There's too many moving parts that, you know, every situation is different. But we've seen the value of bringing a controller up to CFO and how applicable and practical that is for the organization. It's also affordable for the organization, and it works ourselves out of a job as the fractional CFO, but in a purpose-driven way, and exactly what we want for those growth businesses. But a lot of times those controllers can end up being much better CFOs than we were. Maybe I'm speaking personally there. But if they didn't have the opportunity to learn and be mentored and coached, and that wasn't a priority of someone, how are they going to get that, right? And so I think that's an important part of even the small business. You got to think about your team, your succession, and what's ahead. And Lyndsey, thank you for the compliment. I will tell you one thing though, is as those of you that are hiring managers that are proactive and always thinking ahead, it does insult people when they quit on like a Wednesday morning and you have them fully replaced by the next day. So maybe keep it a little quiet, because I've done that a few times. Like within 24 hours, I'm like, you are replaced. Thank you in advance for all the training and transition that you will do. I'm so excited for you. And they're like, I thought it would be a little harder. It's like, oh, I'm on 7 steps ahead of each of you. Don't worry. But I'm going to keep everyone now. No one's quitting again at Amplify. That's the new rule. How do I put that in place? I'm not sure. All right, we're almost out of time. In fact, we are out of time. Any last words before we wrap this? Okay, for everybody that joined us, thank you. I appreciate that Lyndsey, Amanda, and David are true experts in talent, and that you put up with my BS in the meantime. Reminder, personal CFO, very relevant. That's going to be the 3rd Tuesday of May. HR, similar to this, but different in the sense of process, policy, compliance, mental health. So much happening in HR. None of you want the job, so at least find out what the job is. And that is going to be in June, 3rd Tuesday of June. May 30th is our birthday party. It will sell out. It's free, but get a seat, join us. It's just fun, and we deserve to have some fun, and we deserve to say thank you to you, because this company wouldn't exist if it wasn't for each and every one of you. We appreciate your referrals. We appreciate that you're candidates. We appreciate that you tell people about us. So thank you, and let us thank you properly on May 30th, hopefully in the sun on a patio, but maybe in a bar. We'll see. We have both available at Last Best. Very excited. FEI, lots happening there. Consider it, join, come to a free event, give it a trial. And then of course, Last Best again for the CPA event. We're excited to be supporting our institute and Lyndsey's alumni. So very excited about that sponsorship too. So never a shortage of things happening in Amplify, and we really appreciate that you guys spending the time with us. You'll get CPD certificates shortly. And if you have further questions, or you are a candidate or a hiring manager or business owner, don't forget to reach out to David, Amanda, or Lyndsey, because they're obviously the right people to help you, and we appreciate their expertise. Thanks, guys.